Christmas Eve of 1887, a snowstorm buried the Wyoming frontier beneath a blanket of white, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the emptiness inside Caleb Dawson's heart. 2 years earlier, fever had stolen his wife, leaving him alone with a 6-year-old daughter and a ranch that seemed larger and lonelier with every passing season. Most men in town believed Caleb was strong because he never complained, but strength and loneliness were not the same thing. Every night after his daughter Lucy fell asleep, he sat beside the fire staring at the empty chair that once belonged to his wife. He had stopped, believing in happiness a long time ago. "Papa, do you think she'll really come?" Lucy asked, her eyes shining with excitement as she stood near the frost-covered window. Caleb sighed heavily. 3 months earlier, after much pressure from neighbors and relatives, he had answered a mail-order bride advertisement. He had not done it for himself. He had done it for Lucy. A little girl needed a mother's care, and a ranch needed more than one pair of hands. Love was not part of the arrangement. "If the stagecoach makes it through the storm, she'll come," Caleb replied. Lucy smiled brightly. "I hope she likes Christmas." Before Caleb could answer, a sudden knock echoed through the cabin. Both father and daughter froze. Lucy's eyes widened. "She's here." Caleb's stomach tightened as he walked toward the door. He had imagined many possibilities, but nothing prepared him for what waited outside. The woman standing in the snow looked as though life had fought her every day and won most of the battles. Her dress was old and patched. Her coat was thin. Her boots were cracked from long miles of travel. Snow clung to her dark hair while icy wind whipped around her fragile frame. Yet her eyes remained calm and proud. She held a worn carpet bag in one hand and looked directly at him. "Mr. Dawson?" she asked, softly. "My name is Emily Harper." For several seconds, Caleb could not speak. This was not the woman he had imagined. She looked poor enough to need saving herself. Before he could respond, Lucy rushed forward and grabbed Emily's hand. "You're freezing. Come inside." Emily offered a small, grateful smile and stepped into the warmth of the cabin. As the door closed behind her, Caleb found himself staring at the patches sewn carefully across her sleeves. Whoever she was, she had known hardship. Emily sat near the fireplace while Lucy hurried to bring her a cup of coffee. The little girl chatted endlessly while Emily listened patiently, answering every question with kindness. Caleb remained silent. He watched, he listened, and he wondered what circumstances could have brought a woman like her all the way to Wyoming. Later that evening, while Lucy proudly showed Emily every corner of the cabin, Caleb stood alone by the window. Snow continued falling heavily outside. If he decided to send her away, it would have to wait. No traveler could survive the roads tonight. Across the room, Lucy laughed at something Emily said. The sound stopped Caleb cold. He realized it had been months since he had heard his daughter laugh like that. After supper, Emily quietly washed the dishes without being asked. Then she repaired a tear in Lucy's favorite stocking while the little girl watched with admiration. When Caleb noticed the careful stitches, something stirred inside him. It was a small thing, but it reminded him of the way his wife used to care for the home. Still, he refused to let his guard down. Kindness could be temporary. Appearances could be deceiving. Later that night, after Lucy was asleep, Caleb stepped outside into the freezing darkness. The stars shone above the snowy plains. He told himself this arrangement was only practical, nothing more. Yet when he returned to the cabin, he found the fire carefully tended, a lamp left burning low beside his chair, and a blanket folded neatly across the couch. Emily had thought of everything. Standing there in the quiet cabin, Caleb felt something unfamiliar move inside his chest. Not love, not yet, but perhaps the smallest spark of hope. And for a man who had lived in darkness for 2 years, even a spark could change everything. The days after Christmas settled into a quiet rhythm across the ranch. Snow covered the Wyoming plains like an endless white ocean, while bitter winds swept across the land. Emily quickly became part of the household, though Caleb still kept a careful distance. Every morning she rose before sunrise, prepared breakfast, and helped Lucy with reading lessons while Caleb handled the ranch work. She never complained, never asked for anything, and never acted as though the hardships of her life had been unfair. Lucy followed her, everywhere. "Miss Emily, can you show me how to sew? Miss Emily, can you teach me another song? Miss Emily, can you tell me what Missouri looks like?" Emily answered every question with patience and warmth. The little girl's laughter slowly returned to the house, filling corners that had felt empty for years. Caleb noticed it even when he pretended not to. One evening he returned from the barn to find Lucy sitting at the kitchen table practicing her handwriting. "Look, Papa," she said proudly, holding up a page covered in uneven letters. "Miss Emily taught me." Caleb examined the page and nodded. "That's good work." Lucy grinned. "She says I'm getting smarter every day." Emily smiled from across the room, but said nothing. Caleb looked away quickly. The kindness in her eyes made him uncomfortable because it reminded him of things he had spent years trying to forget. A week later, a fierce snowstorm trapped them inside the cabin for 2 days. The wind howled outside while snow piled against the walls. With nowhere to go, Caleb found himself spending more time in the same room as Emily. He watched as she told Lucy stories by the fire, repaired torn clothes, and somehow made the small cabin feel warmer than it had since Emma's death. One night after Lucy had fallen asleep on the rug beside the fireplace, Caleb carried his daughter to bed. When he returned, Emily was quietly mending one of his work shirts. "You don't have to do that," he said. Emily glanced up. "I know." "Then why are you?" She smiled softly. "Because it needed mending." Caleb sat down across from her. The fire crackled between them. For several moments neither spoke. Finally he asked the question that had been troubling him since her arrival. "Why did you answer my advertisement?" Emily's hands paused. She looked into the flames before answering. "Because I had nowhere else to go." Caleb remained silent. Emily continued. "My father owned a small business back east. Everyone believed he was successful. When he died, I learned he had borrowed money from nearly everyone in town. There were debts I never knew existed." Her voice remained calm, but sadness flickered in her eyes. "I sold everything to repay what he owed. The house, the furniture, my mother's belongings, everything." Caleb listened carefully. "And after that? After that, I had nothing." She looked down at her hands. "No family, no home, no future. I found your advertisement in a newspaper and decided it was my only chance to start again." Caleb studied her face. There was no self-pity in her words, no bitterness, only honesty. "You could have hidden the truth," he said quietly. "You could have borrowed better clothes and pretended to be someone else." Emily met his eyes. "A marriage built on lies never survives. I wanted you to know exactly who I was." Something inside Caleb shifted. He had known many people in his life, but very few possessed that kind of honesty. The next morning, Lucy slipped while carrying firewood and scraped her arm badly against a sharp piece of wood. Before Caleb could react, Emily was already kneeling beside her. She cleaned the wound, comforted the frightened child, and stayed with her until the tears disappeared. Watching them together stirred emotions Caleb had tried hard to bury. Emily cared for Lucy as though she were her own daughter, not because she had to, because she wanted to. Over the following days, Caleb began noticing things he had ignored before. The way Emily always made sure Lucy's scarf was wrapped properly before going outside. The way she quietly left hot coffee waiting for him after long mornings in the cold. The way she never expected praise for anything she did. One evening, Caleb entered the cabin carrying a small wooden flower he had carved during spare moments in the barn. He placed it on the table without explanation and walked away. The next morning he noticed it sitting on Emily's windowsill where sunlight touched the polished wood. She never mentioned it. Neither did he. Yet both understood the meaning behind the gesture. Then came the day Caleb traveled into town for supplies. The general store was crowded with people escaping the winter cold. As soon as he entered, several women began whispering. Widow Parker, the town's most persistent gossip, approached him with a smile that felt more like a knife than a greeting. "We've heard about your mail-order bride," she said. "Is it true she arrived wearing rags?" Caleb's expression hardened. Her circumstances were difficult. Difficult? Another woman laughed softly. A respectable woman doesn't arrive looking like a beggar. "You have a daughter to think about," Widow Parker added. "People are talking." Caleb said nothing. He purchased his supplies and left, but their words followed him all the way home. By the time he reached the ranch, doubt had begun creeping into his thoughts. What would people think of Lucy, growing up with a woman everyone considered beneath them? Had he made a mistake? When he entered the cabin, he found Emily and Lucy baking bread together. Flour covered both their faces. Lucy laughed so hard she could barely stand. Emily looked happier than he had ever seen her. Yet instead of feeling warmth, Caleb felt confusion. The town's judgment echoed in his mind. During the days that followed, he became distant again. He spoke less, worked longer hours, avoided conversation whenever possible. Emily noticed immediately but never complained. Lucy noticed too. Her smiles grew smaller. Her laughter faded. Then one night, as Caleb walked past Lucy's bedroom, he heard his daughter's trembling voice. "Miss Emily, are you going to leave us someday?" There was a long silence. "Why would you ask that, little one?" Emily replied softly. Lucy's answer shattered Caleb's heart. "Because everyone I love leaves eventually." Standing outside the door, Caleb closed his eyes, and for the first time since Emily arrived, he began to realize how much losing her would hurt them both. Caleb stood alone in the barn long after hearing Lucy's heartbreaking words. The winter wind rattled the wooden walls while darkness settled across the ranch. He could not stop thinking about what his daughter had said. "Everyone I love leaves eventually." Those words followed him like a shadow. For years he had convinced himself that keeping people at a distance would protect him from pain. He had buried his grief beneath work, silence, and stubborn pride. But now he saw the truth. His daughter had been carrying her own loneliness all this time. She had lost her mother. She had watched her father disappear behind walls of sorrow. And now she had finally found someone who made her feel safe again. The thought of taking that away from her filled him with shame. Later that night he entered the cabin quietly. The fire burned low. Lucy was asleep. Emily sat alone by the window, sewing beneath the glow of a lamp. She looked tired, more tired than he had ever noticed before. For a moment, Caleb simply watched her. This woman had arrived with almost nothing. No wealth, no fine clothes, no promises of an easy future. Yet she had brought warmth back into a house that had nearly forgotten how to feel alive. "Emily," he said softly. She looked up, surprised. "Yes?" Caleb sat across from her. "I owe you an apology." Emily's hands became still. "For what?" "For letting other people's opinions influence me." She looked down for a moment as if she already understood. "The town?" He nodded. "They judged you because of your appearance, and for a few days I let their words cloud my judgment." Emily offered a sad smile. "I'm used to that." "You shouldn't have to be." Silence filled the room. Then Caleb spoke the truth he had been avoiding. "You've done more for Lucy in a few weeks than anyone else could have." Emily's eyes softened. "She's a wonderful child. And she loves you." At those words, emotion flickered across Emily's face. She lowered her gaze. "I love her too." The confession hung between them, honest, vulnerable, real. Caleb felt something break inside him, not painfully, like ice finally cracking after a long winter. "Emily," he said quietly, "why didn't you tell me how much the gossip was hurting you?" She gave a small laugh. "Because I didn't come here seeking sympathy." "Then why did you stay?" Emily looked directly into his eyes. "Because this stopped feeling like an arrangement a long time ago." Caleb's heart pounded. Before he could respond, a sudden cry came from Lucy's room. Both rushed down the hallway. The little girl had awakened from a nightmare. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she reached toward Emily. Without hesitation, Emily sat beside her and gathered her into a gentle embrace. "It's all right, little bird," she whispered. "I'm here." Lucy clung tightly to her. "Promise you won't leave." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I promise." Standing in the doorway, Caleb felt his last doubts disappear. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Fresh snow sparkled beneath the winter sun. Caleb hitched the wagon and rode into town. By afternoon, the general store was crowded again. Conversation stopped when he entered. Widow Parker smiled smugly. "Mr. Dawson, how is your mail-order bride?" Caleb placed his supplies on the counter. Then he turned toward the gathered townspeople. "Her name is Emily." The room fell silent. "And she is the finest woman I've ever known." Several faces registered surprise. Caleb continued. "You judged her because her clothes were worn, because she arrived with nothing, but none of you know her character." Nobody spoke. "She is honest, hard-working, kind, and brave. She has shown more dignity in hardship than most people show in comfort." Widow Parker's smile vanished. Caleb looked around the room. "The truth is, my daughter loves her, and so do I." Silence followed. Then Caleb walked out without another word. For the first time in years, he felt free. When he returned home, he found Emily hanging laundry outside while Lucy played nearby. The winter sun illuminated the snow around them. It was the most beautiful sight Caleb had seen in years. Emily noticed him approaching. "You're home early." Caleb climbed down from the wagon and walked toward her. Lucy sensed something important was happening and quietly stepped back. Caleb stopped in front of Emily. "I went to town." "I see that." He smiled, a real smile, one he had not worn in a very long time. "I told everyone exactly what I should have said from the beginning." Emily looked confused. "And what was that?" Caleb reached into his coat pocket. Inside was a small silver ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "That you're worth more than anything I could ever own." Emily's eyes widened. "Caleb, when you arrived on Christmas Eve, I saw your worn clothes, before I saw your heart." His voice grew softer. "That was my mistake." Tears filled Emily's eyes. Caleb took her hand. "You brought life back into this home. You gave Lucy joy again. And somewhere along the way, you gave me hope." Lucy grinned from several feet away. "Say yes," she shouted. Both adults laughed through their tears. Caleb squeezed Emily's hand gently. "Emily Harper, will you stay here not because of an advertisement or an agreement, but because we choose each other?" For a moment she could not speak. Then she nodded. "Yes." Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger. Lucy raced forward and threw her arms around both of them. Snow drifted softly from the sky as the three stood together beneath the Wyoming winter sun. The loneliness that had haunted the ranch for years was finally gone. People would always judge by appearances. Some would always measure worth by wealth, status, or possessions. But Caleb had learned a different lesson. The greatest treasures often arrived wrapped in the humblest packages. And on a snowy Christmas Eve, a woman who seemed to have nothing had given him everything. From that day forward, the ranch became known not for its size or success, but for the family who lived there. A family built on honesty, courage, kindness, and love. And every Christmas thereafter, whenever snow began falling across the Wyoming plains, Caleb remembered the night a woman arrived wearing patched clothes and carrying a single suitcase. The night he almost failed to see her true value. The night his life changed forever. The end. Legend of West.